queen still. No, I haven't got a power queen. And I'm my own queen. Hi everybody. I don't even know if it's afternoon or evening still. I think I'm still running on UK time actually. My name is Halcyon Myers and I'm basically a multiple business owner. So I've got two businesses, one that's creative, because I'm a creative person, so I make and sell my art, my jewellery and my photography products. My second business, which is actually what I've come to talk about, was founded on my experiences of overcoming, I feel really static, adversity. I'm going to do the walking up and down. Yeah, it was actually overcoming 29 years of adversity, and I created a program for women last March actually, called the Empower 7, and it's actually the Empower 7. I'm going to take you through the 7 stages of overcoming any kind of challenge or adversity. These are tools I've used in my own life, personal, and also for my business, to be able to create, well, have 2 businesses in 4 years, and from somebody who was never interested in starting my own business before. That's a bit blank there, I don't know if we can get another picture up or something. So basically my background started in Hackney in London, in community work, so I used to work with 5 to 16-year-olds. And that is something I've done for about 15 years with young people. I also went into prisons and worked with people who were lifers, who had committed offences where their families had disowned them. And I've also worked in many other community organisations. But basically, the Empower 7 programme is really about 7 stages for overcoming any kind of adversity. So the first stage is actually the acronym, is the E, which is about embracing. So regardless of whatever it is, the challenge you're going through, a lot of the time we bury our heads in the sand, but we really have to embrace it and accept it. It might not be something we like, or wherever we are, but we have to come to that stage of accepting whatever it is. The second stage is about motivation, because regardless of what we're going through, we have to find the drive to get through it and believe that we can get through it. So there was a stage when I had very early babies, premature twins. I lost my youngest when he was 3 weeks old, and I was a single mum, so I was actually a single mum before I had the babies. I went through that on my own, birth, death, and my youngest son was actually in hospital for 6.5 months. I couldn't take him home, heart surgery and a number of other complications. But I always knew that I would have him home because I could vision that. I started to do a lot of visioning work, and I actually knew that regardless of what was going on, I was going to get through that, so I had to stay motivated. I started listening to a lot of Les Brown, whoever resonated with me, reading a lot of books, and knowing that actually you'll get my cheesy up. So the third stage is actually about, is the P, which is about taking back power, because regardless of whatever the situation is, we can always take the power back. We don't have to keep saying this is happening because of our circumstances, this is happening because of our background, this is happening because of where we live, where we grew up. If I listen to a lot of that, where I lived and where I grew up was one of the most notorious estates in London, in Hackney, actually in the 70s, and we was always told we would never amount to nothing. There was many people that ended up either in prisons, some of them are not here, we've had to bury them, or addicted to drugs or alcohol. But for me, I knew that coming from that estate, even though I lived there, I was not off that, and I knew that I was going to aspire, so I did push myself to go to university. I was the first person in 5 generations to go to university, and I studied out of London as well. So you have to take back that power. The O is actually for, the O is actually for overcoming adversity. So it's basically using tools and tips. So for me, because a lot of the things I was going through were quite hard, I had to really start getting back into doing meditation every day, and just finding 5 to 10 minutes to just have the quiet time. And literally, because I had an older son at the time, he was 8, I had to find time of like locking myself in the bathroom just to meditate and just to be able to write down what my vision was and how I was going to overcome that. Yeah, so, sorry. Right, the actual W is about wellness, because regardless of what we are going through, we have to find ways of keeping ourselves well. This feels so horrible, this microphone thing. So you have to actually, apart from thinking about your mind, actually when that is happening, I had to make sure that I was eating well, because I've got bad habits, especially from being younger. If I'm going through a lot of stress, I don't eat. I would usually just drink tea, and that would be it. And just find ways of actually being able to, like I said, meditate. I couldn't go on spiritual retreats or anything like that, but I did used to have a few friends who I could call on when things were really tough and I thought I couldn't kind of make it. And all of the wellness, you have to think about your mental, spiritual and your physical wellness. So it's something I was really advise. With the E, it was actually about emotional intelligence. So as a young woman, growing up where I grew up, I was very suppressed and I was very withdrawn. So I had to really learn to come out of myself. And when I did, I actually became very wild, very vocal and very fiery. So if people, well, used to come to me in a specific way, I'd want to fight and stuff like that. So I had to really learn how to be emotionally intelligent and use my mind to actually overcome, rather than wanting to be physical because I couldn't handle whatever else was going on at the time. So the emotional intelligence really needed for all of those situations. And the last one is actually the R, which is for resilience, because regardless of what we have experienced, we can overcome anything. And I think losing my child was one thing, but you know, there's a range of things that I've actually overcome. And when we hear other people with their stories, there is so much people have actually been through, and just sometimes even sharing your story and making sure that you've got some kind of support network, like you were saying, actually, is actually one of the best things to do. So I feel like my talk has kind of finished quick, but that's my empowering stuff to overcome any adversity.
Thank you, Hyacinth. Wait there to see if there's any questions. Remember, we do question time now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Has anyone got any questions for Hyacinth?
Yes.
Question here, yes.
Or you got
The P is power, to take out the power.
P is take up power. Yes.
So my question is to you, Hyacinth, how would you describe yourself now? If you were to describe yourself in one word, what would it be? And I actually have 3 questions, yeah? And what is one thing that you wouldn't change about your experience? And how are you going to use, I know that you talked about other things, but how are you going to go forward and help others with what you've experienced? So how would you describe yourself in one word?
I would just have to say spiritual, because I think that's the only thing. At the time, I was kind of, I think when I started my journey, I believed that there was a source, but I didn't know what. So I went through a lot of the major religions. I was like Rasta for a while, I was a Buddhist, this was into Christianity. So actually just knowing that there is something out there higher than me and greater than me, the source. What's the second question?
It's what won't you change about your experience?
Do you know what? I actually always used to think to myself, I would change so much, but I'm actually now thankful, because I think growing and learning about personal development has made me know that everything happened to me for a reason, and every terrible thing that I would have classed as terrible, that I hid from people and I thought was broken, was actually giving me some kind of tools to share with someone else.
I think that answers the 3rd question, that's fine.
Yeah. Anyone else got any other questions? Can we give Hyacinth another massive round of applause? So what we're speaking about is dealing with trauma and getting over trauma. And if you are going into business, you are going to be successful, sometimes one of the first things we need to do is to unload and to unbaggage. And Hyacinth has given us some steps on how to do that, so that's wonderful.